Before starting any MSB product repair, there are a few crucial tips to keep in mind. When touching any circuit boards or electrical components, it is always best to touch the chassis of the product first, or use an ESD-safe work surface or grounding bracelet to prevent any electrostatic discharge from harming the product. It is important to keep track of all hardware throughout the build process to prevent any loose hardware from getting left inside the unit. Also, keep in mind that there is a variety of hardware used in each product. Some products use soft nylon screws to prevent unwanted electrical connections. These screws are delicate and can cross-thread very easily. Other products have crucial heat-sensitive devices. If over-tightened, they can crack and shorten the life of the product. Pay careful attention to what type of hardware is being used and how it is being used when disassembling your product. Start by removing any digital input modules and blanks. Then remove the Cascade Link fiber module by folding down the release lever and pulling it out. Flip the unit over and use a 7/64 Allen driver to remove the 13/6/32 cover screws and lock washers. Be sure to keep track of all your hardware throughout the repair process. Now, using the two cutouts in the heat sinks, lift the cover up and pull it towards the front to clear the connectors from the jack panel. To replace the display, start by removing the ribbon cable at the front of the product. Once it is unplugged, use a 3/32 ball end Allen driver to remove the 8/6/32 nylon screws at the back of the display. These screws do not need to be removed completely. Unscrew them until they are just barely showing in the display pocket. Now you can remove the display by pulling it slightly back and then up out of the pocket. Sometimes the display mask will come out with the display. At this point, you can access the tinted glass and diffusion layer and lift them out of the pocket as well. When reinstalling the glass, diffusion layer, and display mask, make sure that they are correctly stacked. Pay attention to the small hole cutout in the display mask. This hole is for the IR sensor on the display board. Put them back into the display pocket as a packet. Once the layers are neatly inside the pocket, lower the display board back in behind it. It is easiest to match up the first row of pins at the edge of the board with the first row of holes in the display mask. Hand tighten 2 of the nylon screws to hold the display in place. Once you have verified that the display and the 3 layers in front of it are mounted properly, use a 3/32 ball end Allen driver to retighten the 8/6/32 nylon screws at the back of the display pocket. They need to be tight enough to hold the display firmly pressed into the front pocket, but if you see any bending or distorting of the screw as it contacts the display board, don't tighten it any further. When you have all of the screws tightened, you can do a visual inspection of the display by checking that it is evenly in the pocket along the front edge and that there is no gap around the outside edge of the glass. Tap gently on the display to check for poor fitment or loose mounting. Now you can replace the ribbon cable at the back of the display. If you need to replace the transformer, use a T30 driver to remove the 1/4-20 bolt and rubber washer at the center. Use a number 2 Phillips to remove the 6/32 screw and washer holding the cable clamp. Now you can unplug the wiring harnesses. For the black connector, just squeeze the tabs on both sides and lift. For the white connector, squeeze the release tab on the side and pull it out. Now you can lift the transformer out of the pocket. To replace it, make sure the rubber washer is placed in the pocket and then set the transformer on top. Once the transformer is in, use a number 2 Phillips to re-secure the cable clamp. Then use a T30 driver to reinstall the 1/4-20 bolt and rubber washer. Reconnect the wiring harness at the appropriate spots. To remove the front circuit board, start by unplugging the white transformer connector and the ribbon cable between the two circuit boards. Remove the ribbon cable for the display. Then use a number 1 Phillips to remove the 9-440 board screws. Use a 3/32 Allen driver to remove the two 440 device screws and their lock washers. Now you can remove the board by tilting the back edge up and then pulling it out from under the nylon display screws. If you need to replace or change the color of your accent pieces, the buttons are easily accessible at the front edge of the pocket. Instructions for replacing other accent pieces of your Cascade Director, like your knob and feet, can be found near the end of this video. When reinstalling the circuit board, start by applying non-silicone, non-conductive thermal compound on the two devices under the board. Too much compound is not good for proper heat transfer. Replace the board by pushing the front edge under the nylon screws and then laying it flat in the pocket. Reinstall the two 440 device screws and the lock washers using a 3/32 Allen driver. Over-tightening these screws can result in cracking the devices. Tighten these screws just enough to flatten the lock washer and press the device against the chassis. Use a number 1 Phillips to reinstall the 9-440 screws with each of their flat washers and lock washers. Then, reconnect the ribbon cable for the front display. Reconnect the ribbon cable between the two circuit boards and reconnect the transformer harness as well. To replace the standby power board, start by using a number 2 Phillips to remove the 632 screw and washer holding the cable clamp before unplugging the black transformer connector. Then remove the 632 screw and washer from the blue transformer. Then remove the two 632 screws on the jack panel using a number 2 Phillips. Remove the ribbon cable between the two circuit boards. Use a 1/4-inch socket to remove the green 632 ground screw. Now use a number 1 Phillips to remove the 5-440 board screws. Now you can lift the board out of the chassis by clearing the connectors from the jack panel and lifting it out. Replace the circuit board by guiding the connectors into the jack panel before laying it flat in the pocket. Start by using a number 2 Phillips to reinstall the two 632 screws in the jack panel. Use a number 2 Phillips to replace the 632 screw and washer in the blue transformer. Then use a number 1 Phillips to reinstall the 5-440 board screws with each of their flat washers and lock washers. Using a 1/4-inch socket, replace the green 632 ground screw. Reconnect the black transformer connector and then use a number 2 Phillips to attach the cable clamp with the 632 screw and washer. Reconnect the ribbon cable connecting the two boards. Make sure the ferrite bead lays flat in the opening. To remove the motherboard from the cover, start by using a number 1 Phillips and remove the 5-440 board screws and washers. Then use a number 1 Phillips to remove the 8 256 screws along the connectors. Before reinstalling a motherboard, use thermal paste on the two small posts in the middle of the base metal. Align the motherboard using the 2 stops on the base metal. Rest the edge of the board against the 2 stops before positioning the board from side to side to align the hole next to the Cascade Link fiber connector. Once properly placed, use a number 1 Phillips to reinstall the 5440 board screws with each of their flat washers and lock washers. Now, reinstall the 8 256 connector screws with the appropriate lock washers and flat washers. If you need to replace the knob, use a 7/64 Allen driver to remove the 632 screw and washer in the center of the knob while holding it in place with a hand under the chassis. Once the screw and washer are out, you can push the knob out from the top and receive it with your other hand. Then you can lift the chassis and pull it clear. To replace it, slide the knob under the product and lift it into the pocket with one hand while you reinstall the 632 screw and washer using a 7/64 Allen driver in the other hand. To replace the foot or foot pad, start by using a pair of needle nose pliers to remove the Viton ball at the tip of the foot. Then use a number 14 spanner style driver to loosen the foot using the 2 dimples that can be found inside the tip. Once the foot is off, you can use a 7/64 Allen driver to reach the 632 screw located at the bottom of the exposed hole. Loosen this screw to release the foot pad from the top of the product. When reinstalling the foot pad, orient the pad so that the raised portion is aligned with the heat sinks and the threaded hole is towards the outside edge of the product. Then hold the foot pad in place with one hand while using a 7/64 Allen driver to tighten the screw at the bottom of the foot cavity. After the foot pad is secured, thread the foot back onto the product and use a number 14 spanner style driver to tighten it. Lastly, push the Viton ball back into the tip of the foot and be sure that it is fully seated. To put the product back together, start by guiding the Cascade Link connector back into the jack panel and make sure the cover is all the way back before lowering it into place. Once it is in position, give it a light push in the center until you can feel the motherboard connectors mate properly. Now, using a 7/64 Allen driver, reinstall the 13 632 cover screws and their lock washers. Start by tightening the opposite corners of the cover first to ensure proper alignment. Once everything is together, you can flip the unit over and reinstall the Cascade Link fiber module. Make sure the release lever is all the way back in place. If it is left touching the chassis, it will create a grounding error. The last step is to reinstall your digital input modules and any blanks. Now your product is ready to go back in the system.